Have you ever wondered why something so sacred as marriage, something meant to unite hearts upon faith, has become one of the most complicated and misunderstood subjects among Muslims today? Why, in a time when faith should be our greatest bond, are so many men turning away from practicing women and so many women feeling rejected for holding on to their deen? This question is not about blame, it's about reflection, because if something feels broken in our ummah, it means there is something deeper that needs healing. In a time when everything around us seems to be changing, the way we think, the way we love, the way we choose, marriage too has become a reflection of this confusion. We live in a world that glorifies comfort but forgets commitment, that chases beauty but neglects the soul. And so, when we look at the growing reality that many Muslim men no longer want to marry practicing women, we must pause and ask what has gone wrong. How did something once so natural, wanting a partner close to Allah, become something so rare? The truth is, our perception of what makes a good spouse has been blurred by a modern lens that values ease over effort and appearance over essence. Many men, and even women, have come to fear faith not because Islam is hard, but because living it sincerely exposes what we must work on within ourselves. A practicing woman, one who guards her modesty, prays consistently, and holds her boundaries firmly, reminds a man of his responsibility. Her strength in faith becomes a mirror to his spiritual state, and sometimes that reflection is uncomfortable. So instead of growing into better believers, some retreat from faith-based partners in search of what feels easier, someone who won't challenge their soul. Love that doesn't challenge you will never elevate you. Marriage in Islam was never meant to be a place of mere convenience. It was meant to be a means of purification, a journey toward Allah together. This change didn't happen overnight. Generation grew up surrounded by a culture that teaches men to seek validation through dominance and women to seek worth through admiration. In this distorted picture, practicing woman, confident, modest, self-respecting, spiritually grounded, doesn't fit the narrative of modern beauty. She's often labeled as too strict, too serious, or too religious. But what people fail to see is that her strength doesn't make her hard to love, it makes her worth loving. The problem isn't her deen, it's the distance we've collectively created from ours. Many Muslim men today fear that a woman devoted to her deen will restrict them, but in reality, her faith protects them. A woman who fears Allah will honor her husband, guard her home, and raise her family in remembrance of Allah. Yet the whispers of modern society tell men that freedom lies in escaping faith, when in truth, peace only exists within it. When the heart becomes accustomed to the world, it begins to see faith as a burden. But when the heart remembers its creator, it realizes that obedience is not restriction, it's protection. Marriage is not a playground for desires. It's a covenant before Allah. And when men start to fear responsibility, they start to avoid women who remind them of it. This isn't a gender war, it's a spiritual crisis. Many men are spiritually exhausted, overwhelmed, or unsure of their role in a world that constantly tells them they're not enough. They may distance themselves from practicing women not out of arrogance but out of insecurity. A woman grounded in faith requires emotional maturity, honesty, and commitment, qualities that can't grow in a heart distracted by dunya. Some men find temporary comfort in relationships that ask for less accountability. What they lose in the process is priceless, a companion who would have been their partner not just in this world, but in the next. Islam does not divide men and women. It elevates both by defining their unique roles and shared purpose to worship Allah together. A practicing woman doesn't demand perfection. She seeks effort, sincerity, and taqwa in a partner who understands that love without deen is like a body without a soul. If we look deeper, this issue isn't about women being too religious. It's about society being too distant from Allah. We've been conditioned to believe that compatibility lies in shared hobbies, humor, or appearance, forgetting that the greatest form of compatibility is shared faith. The Prophet A said that a woman is married for 4 reasons: her wealth, lineage, beauty, and religion. But he advised to choose the one with religion, so that your hands may be blessed. Yet today people chase everything but religion and wonder why blessings disappear from their marriages. When a man avoids a practicing woman because she reminds him of prayer, modesty, or morality, he's not rejecting her, he's rejecting the very things that would have brought peace to his heart. The Quran teaches that believing men and believing women are allies of one another. They help each other stay firm on the path of truth. A marriage rooted in faith is not perfect, but it is purposeful. It's a place where both souls fall, learn, forgive, and rise together. Perhaps the question we should ask is not why men don't want practicing women, but why faith no longer feels attractive to us. Because when the heart becomes distant from Allah, even the most beautiful qualities, modesty, humility, piety, start to look foreign. We begin to crave validation from the world rather than love from the Creator. The healing begins when we start seeing piety not as limitation, but as liberation. When a man learns to see a practicing woman not as a threat to his comfort, but as a partner to his growth, his perspective shifts entirely. Such a woman will not drag him down. She will raise him up spiritually and emotionally. And when a man's heart is anchored in Allah, he seeks not the woman who pleases his ego, but the one who pleases his Lord. That is the kind of man who can lead with love, humility, and strength. And that is the kind of marriage Islam envisions, two people walking side by side, helping each other reach Jannah. So if you're a woman holding onto your deen and feeling unseen, remember this: your value is not measured by who chooses you, but by the one who created you. And if you're a man who feels distant from faith but longs for peace, know that it begins with a single step back to Allah. The world may tell you that practicing faith makes love harder, but Allah promises that it makes it purer. The most beautiful love stories are not written in text messages or photos. They are written in du'as, in patience, and in obedience. The kind of love that lasts forever is the love that starts with Allah, is lived for Allah, and ends with meeting Him. We live in a world where love, faith, and commitment are often seen through a distorted lens, and one of the most painful reflections of that distortion is found in the way marriage has changed within our ummah. Once upon a time, Muslim men would seek women who were close to Allah because they knew that a woman with taqwa would become the light of their home and the peace of their heart. But today, many Muslim men hesitate to marry practicing women, not because faith has lost its beauty, but because our understanding of it has become clouded by worldly illusions. The rise of modern culture has redefined what it means to be desirable, replacing spiritual depth with surface level attraction and sincerity with status. We live in a society that glorifies physical beauty, social confidence, and financial success while quietly mocking humility, modesty, and spiritual devotion. Practicing woman with her hijab, her principles, and her quiet dignity becomes a stranger in this culture, and many men see her not as a blessing, but as a challenge, someone who will demand accountability, who will remind them of prayer, who will hold them to moral standards when the world tells them to chase comfort. And because comfort has become the god of our age, faith begins to look like an obstacle instead of a refuge. What many fail to realize is that a woman who fears Allah doesn't restrict you, she protects you. Her strength doesn't suppress love, it purifies it. A practicing woman will not make life dull, she will make it meaningful. Yet the modern man, raised on images of effortless pleasure and shallow validation, begins to fear the depth that faith brings. He wants companionship, but not accountability, affection, but not growth, love, without the submission that Islam requires from both hearts toward Allah. And so when he encounters a woman who lives for her Lord, he feels as though he's looking into a mirror that reflects not her flaws, but his own spiritual distance. It's not that practicing women have become too religious. It's that many hearts have become too worldly to recognize their worth. The tragedy lies not in the women who hold on to their deen, but in the men who see that deen as a burden instead of a blessing. When religion becomes something we hide from instead of something we build upon, our relationships lose their soul. We start choosing partners based on attraction rather than alignment, on comfort rather than conviction. The Prophet taught that a woman is married for her beauty, wealth, lineage, and religion, but he reminded us to prioritize faith because beauty fades, wealth changes, and lineage means nothing before Allah. Yet today, faith has become the last criterion on the list when it was meant to be the foundation of everything. And so we see marriages built on weak grounds, relationships that look perfect on the outside but collapse under the weight of life's tests because they were never anchored in taqwa. When men start to see practicing women as too much, it is often because they have been taught to see the dunya as enough. They have forgotten that peace doesn't come from freedom, it comes from submission to Allah. The same woman they avoid for being too religious would be the one who prays for them in sujud, who guards their secrets, who stands by them through hardship, who raises their children upon truth. But when the heart is veiled by desires, it cannot see the beauty of such a woman. It only seeks what feeds the ego. not what feeds the soul. And perhaps that's the core of our problem. We have mistaken ease for happiness. Marriage in Islam was never meant to be an escape from responsibility. It was meant to be a journey of purification, a path that brings two souls closer to Jannah. A practicing woman doesn't expect perfection. She seeks effort. She doesn't want wealth or status. She wants sincerity. A world intoxicated by appearances will always see her purity as pressure, yet she remains firm because she knows that her worth isn't defined by who desires her, by the one who created her. The truth is, this isn't a battle between men and women. It's a reflection of a deeper spiritual crisis within both. Men fear women of deen because they have forgotten the sweetness of living with deen themselves. And women sometimes lose hope in finding righteous men because they forget that Allah is the one who writes every destiny. If only we understood that the real beauty of love is not in how much it fulfills our desires, but in how much it brings us closer to Allah. The practicing woman is not outdated. She is timeless. Her modesty is not a prison, it's her crown. And the man who recognizes that, who values her not for her looks, but for her light, will find in her the kind of love that outlasts this world. Because when a marriage is built for Allah, it cannot be broken by dunya. We don't need fewer practicing women, we need more practicing men. Men who see piety as strength, not restriction, who understand that true leadership begins with humility, who know that a woman's faith is not a threat to their freedom, but a path to their peace. When we return to that understanding, when we remember that love without deen is like a body without a soul, we will stop asking why men don't want practicing women and start asking how we lost sight of what made marriage sacred in the first place. In today's modern age, the perception of marriage and love among Muslims has shifted so drastically that what was once viewed as sacred is now seen as inconvenient, and what was once a blessing is now viewed as a burden. The topic of why many Muslim men hesitate to marry practicing women reveals much more than just a social trend. It exposes the deep spiritual and emotional disconnection that has spread throughout our community. Many men growing up in a world dominated by social media, materialism, and unrealistic portrayals of relationships have begun to view love through a filtered lens. They are constantly exposed to women who represent a lifestyle of freedom, beauty, and ease, while faith-oriented women appear to represent responsibility, boundaries, and restraint. This distorted contrast has led to confusion about what truly brings peace in a relationship. The practicing woman who wears her hijab with conviction and guards her modesty not for culture but for her creator becomes misunderstood. Some men see her as too rigid, too traditional, even as a reminder of the parts of faith they have neglected. Her piety often shines a light on the spiritual weakness of others, and instead of inspiring reflection, it provokes discomfort. The heart that has not tasted closeness to Allah sees modesty as oppression, humility as weakness, and faith as restriction. And so, instead of seeking a woman who will elevate his soul, a man may chase the one who entertains his desires, forgetting that physical attraction fades. Spiritual companionship deepens with time. In this pursuit, he mistakes peace for pleasure and happiness for distraction, and when the pleasure ends, emptiness remains. Yet the true tragedy is not simply that practicing women are being avoided, but that faith itself has been misunderstood. Islam does not take away from a man's strength, it refines it. The responsibility to lead, provide, and protect is not a burden, it is an honor. And a practicing woman does not demand perfection from her husband. She seeks sincerity. She desires not a man without flaws, but a man who turns back to Allah after falling. Because the world has glorified ego and comfort over humility and effort, many men now fear the kind of woman who expects depth. They are drawn to those who demand less from their faith, because faith requires self-discipline and spiritual effort. They fear being judged, when in reality, a woman of taqwa does not judge, she prays. She doesn't wish to change a man by force, but by her quiet strength and steadfast example. The practicing woman embodies a love that is rooted in Allah, a love that doesn't suffocate or control, but uplifts and protects. Her love is not based on fleeting attraction, but on eternal purpose. And yet the modern heart has become conditioned to seek validation over value. The more disconnected a person becomes from their creator, the less they can recognize his beauty reflected in his creation. That's why a modest woman becomes invisible in a world obsessed with exposure. But her invisibility in the eyes of the world is what makes her visible to Allah. She may be unseen by men, but she is known by her Lord, and the man who understands this truth is the one who will never lose peace, because he has learned to see beyond the surface. The decline in men seeking practicing women is not a problem of attraction, it's a problem of connection. It's not that these women are too religious, it's that faith has become foreign to many hearts. The day we begin to reconnect with Allah is the day we'll start to recognize the beauty of those who live for Him, because when the heart knows its creator, it no longer fears commitment. It seeks it. It no longer avoids faith. It embraces it. True love is not found in rebellion, but in submission. And the one who learns that will realize that the woman who practices her faith is not the one to fear losing freedom ta. She's the one who will lead you to eternal peace. The crisis of understanding between faith and love today has left many hearts restless. What once defined strength, honor, and loyalty in a man has been redefined through a worldly lens that glorifies self-interest and temporary pleasure. When a man distances himself from his spiritual identity, he begins to see everything sacred as a threat to his comfort. This is why so many men now hesitate to marry practicing women, not because these women lack beauty, wisdom, or compassion, but because their presence demands something deeper than appearance. It calls for accountability, sincerity, and growth. A practicing woman is not merely a wife in the worldly sense. She is a reflection of divine purpose. Her modesty reminds him of humility. Her prayer reminds him of his obligations, and her faith reminds him that love is not just about emotion, it's about direction. When the modern man is taught to chase validation rather than virtue, to seek excitement rather than peace, he begins to fear what truly grounds him. The practicing woman represents spiritual steadiness in a world that glorifies chaos, and that steadiness feels heavy to those who are still unsure of themselves. Many men have been shaped by a culture that tells them freedom means avoidance of responsibility, but Islam teaches that true freedom comes through submission to Allah, not through rebellion against Him. Thus, the hesitation to marry practicing women reflects a deeper spiritual crisis, a disconnection from purpose, from balance, and from the sacred nature of love itself. When a man looks at a practicing woman through the lens of faith, he doesn't see rules, he sees refuge. He sees a partner who will stand by him not just in worldly success, but in spiritual trials. Yet, the modern narrative distorts this image, making faith look restrictive and piety seem old-fashioned. Society has glorified the idea that fulfillment comes from pleasure, while Islam teaches that fulfillment comes from peace, and peace is found only when the heart is aligned with Allah. The practicing woman, through her hijab, her prayer, and her humility becomes a symbol of that peace. Her life is a quiet form of worship. Her choices are reflections of her devotion. But many men, driven by societal ideals, fail to see the beauty in her simplicity because they are too distracted by what shines temporarily. This is the tragedy of modern love. It has become about impression, not intention. Men are taught to seek partners who complement their image, not their soul. They want compatibility in lifestyle, not in faith. But the heart that seeks Allah will never be content with a love that distances it from Him. When a man truly understands what marriage means in Islam, he realizes that a practicing woman is not a burden, she's a blessing. She reminds him of Jannah when the world feels like a storm. She anchors him when his heart feels lost. And yet in a time when everything sacred is mocked, many fail to see the treasure they're turning away from. This disconnection between spiritual values and modern expectations has left a void in relationships. Many men today express fear of judgment or control when faced with a practicing woman, but the truth is that fear is often a reflection of their own inner conflict. They know deep inside that her presence calls them higher, and rising higher requires letting go of ego, sin, and heedlessness. It's not that men no longer desire good women, it's that they no longer desire to become the kind of men worthy of them. And this is where the solution lies, in returning to Allah, because when a man reconnects with his faith, his perspective on women transforms. He begins to value modesty over glamour, character over charm, and sincerity over status. He starts to see the practicing woman not as someone who limits him, but as someone who liberates him from his lower desires. Their relationship becomes an act of worship rather than a worldly exchange. Love becomes sacred again, not because it is perfect, but because it is purposeful. The fear of marrying a practicing woman fades when a man realizes that true love is not found in comfort, it's found in striving together for Allah's pleasure. And when that becomes the foundation of a relationship, peace follows, blessings multiply, and love transcends this world into the next. The growing hesitation of men toward marrying practicing women is not a coincidence. It is a symptom of a much deeper spiritual void that modern society has cultivated. In a world where ego is celebrated and humility is dismissed, the values that once held relationships sacred have been replaced with fleeting desires and superficial ideals. The practicing woman, who once represented the epitome of purity, strength, and dignity, is now seen as too religious, too strict, or too difficult. But in reality, she has not changed, the world around her has. She still prays when the world sleeps, still lowers her gaze when others seek attention, and still guards her modesty as an act of devotion, not oppression. Her struggle is not in keeping her faith, but in being misunderstood for it. Many men today have been shaped by a culture that glorifies convenience over commitment, pleasure over patience, and worldly success over spiritual success. This distorted mindset makes faith appear as a burden when in truth, it is the very light that guides a heart through darkness. The fear of marrying a practicing woman stems not from her faith, from a man's unhealed insecurities, his fear of being reminded of his responsibilities, his fear of being held to a higher standard, and his fear of being accountable before Allah. Yet the irony is that true peace, true masculinity, and true purpose are all found in fulfilling those very responsibilities. When a man avoids a practicing woman because she reminds him of Allah, it reflects a deeper fear, not of her, but of his own distance from his Lord. Her presence is a mirror, revealing what he has neglected within himself. She represents discipline, patience, and surrender, while he may still be battling the whispers of his ego that tell him freedom lies in rebellion. This illusion has become the root cause of emotional emptiness. The more a person chases worldly freedom, the more enslaved they become to their desires. A practicing woman, through her devotion, calls him toward a higher freedom, the kind that comes from submission to Allah. But many fail to see this because their vision has been clouded by a materialistic world that measures worth by status, not sincerity. The man who seeks only beauty will never see her light. The man who seeks only pleasure will never taste peace. The man who seeks Allah will find both beauty and peace in her faith. She doesn't seek attention, she seeks acceptance from her Creator. And in doing so, she elevates herself beyond the superficial standards that society imposes. It is her quiet dignity that challenges the world's noise, her modesty that confronts its chaos, and her steadfastness that reminds us that true strength is not loud, it is faithful. Many men today are exhausted by the weight of worldly expectations. They are told to be successful, wealthy, dominant, and admired, but rarely are they told to be righteous. They chase goals that bring applause, but not contentment, relationships that offer validation, but not love. When faced with a practicing woman, they often perceive her as incompatible with their lifestyle because she doesn't conform to the trends that dominate modern relationships. What they fail to realize is that her refusal to compromise is her mercy to them. She doesn't follow the world's standards. She follows divine guidance, which protects both her and her future family. Her modesty is not an obstacle. It is a shield. Her faith is not a restriction. It is freedom. She doesn't want to take away a man's independence. She wants to remind him of his dependence on Allah. Yet, for a man who has not yet learned to surrender, such a reminder feels like a threat. This is why true love cannot exist without spiritual alignment. When a man and woman both seek Allah first, they find each other naturally. But when they seek each other before Allah, they lose both. The practicing woman doesn't need perfection in a man. She needs direction. She needs someone walking toward the same destination, even if his steps are small. The fear men feel toward such women is not a reflection of her flaw. It is a reflection of their unreadiness to walk that path. Ultimately, this fear and hesitation can only be healed by returning to sincerity, by relearning what love and marriage mean in Islam. Marriage is not just companionship, it is worship. It is not built on attraction alone, but on purpose. A man who truly understands his role as a protector, provider, and leader realizes that marrying a practicing woman is not a restriction, it is an elevation. Her faith complements his responsibility. Her patience strengthens his resolve. Together, they become a team striving toward Jannah. But as long as men continue to view religion as control and submission as weakness, they will remain trapped in emotional confusion. The practicing woman doesn't need validation from the world. Her heart is anchored in Allah. It is the men who must rediscover what it means to lead with faith, love with intention, and build homes grounded in peace. The world may teach them that piety is unattractive, that humility is weakness, and that faith limits freedom. Islam teaches that those who honor Allah are never dishonored, and those who protect faith are always protected. When men begin to see through the lens of the heart, They will realize that the practicing woman they once feared was the very one who could lead them back to peace, the kind of peace that no wealth, status, or worldly relationship could ever provide.